Keith, you've had like a lot of different roles in your career, and I'd love for you to like riff a little bit on them. It sounds like you were an operator, then you went into sales, then you went into systems and sales ops. I've also been in sales. Did you like being in sales ops? What kind of brought you to really fall in love with the type of work that you're doing right now? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. So I always like to tell this story a little bit with that I fell into ops by accident. I was given a sales role when I probably didn't deserve one, and then found my way back to ops where I belong.
Mm.
um, I was hired very early on at a rapidly growing healthcare company, and I didn't even know if you had said, "Hey, you should consider a career in sales operations." I would have responded with, "What is sales operations?" And I would have said that question weeks and even months into that job. My title was business operations associate. I was doing forecasting in Excel on behalf of this business on like our bookings and revenue based on like shipping projections. I got a chance to tailor a couple of different processes, things like that. But that same company put me in a sales role. They wanted to put more people in sales from inside the company, which is why I got a shot at doing that. So next thing I knew, I was this field sales rep working for this healthcare company, meeting with CIOs and chief nursing officers in the southeast. I moved to Atlanta for that, and what I love about that role, and later on when I would make my breakthrough into what I just kind of refer to as startup land, my first startup where I was employee number 8, also hired as an account executive there, is that I gained a lot of empathy for sellers throughout that journey, right? It was at the healthcare company that I got my first exposure to Salesforce and CRMs, really like lightweight deployments of sales tech. And that kind of started this journey in my mind of just like I see a way forward to make a really cool career here doing this. It took me a little bit while to really kind of get my footing, if you will, but I'll always remember how hard that job was
Mm.
and how
Hmm.
much I had to try to command my own destiny, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, I was given tools. Yes, I was given quota. Yes, I was given some direction. I had a manager and a one on one and expectations and make sure your deals are in CRM and all of that. So, like, not completely out on my own, but definitely not given a ton of training or a ton of like real time guidance or continuous education. Many go-to-market organizations are much better than the ones I had the opportunity to work in today, but it is a really hard job to do. And so I always try to keep that at the forefront of my mind now in systems when we're trying to design these solutions and walk that balance between what the business needs versus what the seller needs, right? Because those two things can sometimes be competitive in a sense. So yeah, it just, it was a really wonderful experience. I love it that I got to do both. I'll never do sales again. But it's I stand by one particular testimony, which is I think the best operators are former revenue influencers, salespeople,
Yeah.
customer success. Like you just can't replace that empathy.
Very cool. So cool to hear. I feel like the job was even harder like 10, 12 years ago when you were doing that, when there wasn't ChatGPT and you couldn't have someone to bounce ideas off or have like a sales assistant, so to speak. Like I am full time on the podcast now and I have a big sales role to kind of like pay the bills now and find sponsorships. And I rely on ChatGPT so much for having like I've got a custom GPT that's just like my sales director, and he's giving me advice on scripts for like my media kit, how I chat with folks, and the job is so tough. It's really really hard, and yeah, like I totally get what you said. Like building that empathy for sales, it's a really tough job. No kidding. You were
Mhm.
sales too, Daryl? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if this resonates with you, Keith, but I felt like when I was selling one to one, right? I would always feel like, man, this deck sucks, or man, this process sucks, and like I wish I could just fix it for everyone. And like
Hmm.
that was like the thing that kind of got me to like I couldn't just I wasn't satisfied just talking one-to-one with a person. I wanted to help
Mm,
many people. And that was like sort of my transition
Mm.
into marketing, because marketing is one to many versus sales is
mhm.
one-to-one. And then ultimately to system. Does that resonate with you at all?
Oh, 100%. And
Yep.
actually, funny enough, that actually is what organically resulted in the first step of my transition back into more pure operational and systems roles. So I'm at this early stage startup, data as a service offering in Atlanta, Georgia. Hired as employee number 8. I'm like the second or third account executive. I can't quite remember today. And I got to know the product pretty quickly. I'm not the most technical person in the world, right? I can't code to save my life, but I do have, a bit of the brain of an engineer, right? Like I understand the concepts. A lot of that does come rather naturally to me, and so I got to know the product really well. And before I knew it, as we were hiring more and more salespeople at this startup, I was finding myself teaching people about the product. And I love that. And like to your point of like, I didn't want to just be good at speaking to marketers who we sold to at a technical level, what our data product did. I wanted everyone to be good at that. And what do you know? It CEO pulls me aside one day, says, "Come to my office," and he goes, "Hey, listen, I need to tell you something. You're really bad at cold calling. You're terrible at it, like, and you don't even do it very often." And I was like, "You're right. I hate that job.
Yeah.
I'm also really introverted, so like that makes sense."
Oh.
And he's like, "But you know the product better than anyone else on the floor." He's like, "So here's what I'm thinking we should do. You should be our first ever sales engineer, where you're going to
Hmm.
actually do the
Mm.
technical demo and do the proof of concept. How does that sound to you?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, let's do it." And he goes, "Oh, and by the way, our Salesforce admin quit. You want to learn Salesforce too?"
There you go.
So that's how
There
I
you
got back
go.
into sales ops and sales engineering. So yeah, it totally resonates.
Very cool.
Yep.
So GTM systems now at
Hmm.
OpenAI, and you were GTM in that kind of role when you're at Mural
Yeah.
as well. You got to get a whole overview of the landscape when you were an analyst at Gartner. What is GTM ops versus GTM systems? How is it different for marketing ops and sales ops? Just curious your take there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the easy answer is that it depends, right? Depends on the organization, depends on the philosophy and perspective of the leaders overseeing those respective functions. But if I had to give like a dictionary definition for them, I would say that, the ops side of the equation is more about the field facing, field enablement, process innovation, continuous education of like making sure that the field and its leaders. And when I say the field, I'm talking about folks in sales, maybe the individual marketers, product marketing, whatever have you, that they have what they need and that you're working with them in partnership to be that operational counterpart, right? But then in go to market systems, we're more of the folks that, for better or worse, are kind of behind the scenes, right? We're behind the pain of the third and first party technology that's being used by those individuals every day. But that's a very different kind of work and requires deep focus and needs to be done in a really methodical way. I mean, you can get by doing it quickly and haphazard, but eventually, especially at scale, it will come back to bite you. And so I think it's a perfect balance at the end of the day. My team, for example, both at Mural and now here at OpenAI, we rely heavily on our colleagues in the operational teams to feed us the guidance of what the field needs so that we can then build the right solutions on behalf of them. A system team could do that top to bottom, but the reality is, if you want to do the technical work as well as you need to, you can really benefit from this sort of yin and yang, if you will, of ops versus systems. Not really a versus, not a competition. We're side by side at OpenAI, we were side by side at Mural. That's my favorite combination.
Yeah, I think there's also like amount of, or like amount or volume of work that is component of this, because
Mm,
at smaller companies sometimes you can just do both. Like, oh,
yes.
I can run the CRM, I can run the map, and I can talk to salespeople,
And
and
I
I can
and I
talk to
and I did
marketers.
both for 3
Yep.
jobs in a row, but
Mm,
all of
Yeah.
those companies were just a few hundred people,
right.
Yep.
and at one case, I had a sales team that was just low double digits, right? So, like, you're right there, like, you can do both, but if the volume of work and scale is there, eventually they
Yeah.
have to be separate functions.
Yeah. And the ops role, I think, if you're taking the tech away from it, is like really critical. And it doesn't really. I agree with you. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's not like, uh, you're not competing. To be honest, the ops people could sit on the team, on the systems team, just maybe like as a separate group. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter where they sit. The more important thing is, you know, do they understand what the business needs are, and do they understand what the people in the field need, and can you translate that to technical requirements?
Yep.
And working together. Yeah, I think you're right on. That's a really good way to put it.